Okay, evening all. So the Tal-Botvinnik match of 1960 was very, very interesting. So Mikhail Botvinnik, a very positional, strategic kind of player, and he had this ability to successfully regain his title in several instances. Mikhail Tal was just one instance where Mikhail Botvinnik lost the 1960 match but regained his title in the rematch clause. Let's have a look at that 1960 match. So in game 1, Mikhail played e4, and perhaps already from a stylistic point of view, well, Mikhail liked the French defence in any case, but I think against a very attacking player like Tal, who excels at tactics, the French defence would seem to be a very good idea in any case. So in this position we have d4, d5, and the winnower variation. So so knight c3, bishop b4, and this is, you know, what you'd think is very close and strategic. Will Tal be able to excel in this kind of opening? So the winnower, a3, bishop takes c3, b takes, and now a very interesting move, very popular at the time, I think. This move, queen c7. Queen c7 is like an attack and a defensive move, attacking potentially c3 and also potentially defending via f5 or f6. g7, which is often vulnerable in this opening because white is often playing this move queen g4. Okay, and here we see this variation played out. We see queen g4 and black using this f5, so defending g7. Okay, the queen drops back to g3, and now Mikhail plays a seemingly dangerous looking gambit, actually, knight e7, inviting queen takes g7. So this is looking like a dangerous gambit. Rook g8, queen takes h7. Does black have enough play for the two pawns in this position? Okay, well, the queen is potentially kind of misplaced and the king's still in the center. There's virtually zero development here. Sorry, layouts have asked, is queen a5 a move? I'm not really sure of the theory of it on move 6. So let's just check the game out, really. So here black played now c takes d4, and white is in trouble if he plays c takes d4 routinely here, I believe, because of simply queen c3 check, attacking king and rook. So here white plays what you might think is an odd looking move, king d1. In this position, king d1 is, well, it was all theory at the time, I believe, so, but it's interesting to examine the position anyway. So the structure has been undermined. e5 is not with check now, king being here. King supports c2. How will white get these pieces out later? Okay, we see bishop d7, which tries to exploit, maybe, you know, the king being on d1 means this diagonal might be more sensitive than usual. And imagine this c file, it looks a little bit dangerous. We see check, and now knight g6, knight e2, and if white can play now c takes d4, that would be very good, surely. But with the bishop on d7, Mikhail emphasizes now that bishop on d7 by playing this next move, d3. He's trying to split open this diagonal here for that bishop to be quite dangerous. So, can it be avoided? well, Mikhail thought it's best not to. If the knight moves, well, it's still queen takes c3 time. This has to be taken. Surely. Knight d4, we have queen takes c3. It would be a disaster. So it's taken, allowing bishop a4 check. So yes, I think he knows what he's doing with this. It's all presumably theory of the time. So now the king actually goes to e1 here. If king d2, let's see, is it a lot more dangerous, king d2 as a new variation? Possibly. It's a very complicated position actually. So there might be I assume there's some very special reasons behind king e1. Black takes on e5. Okay, and now we see bishop g5, which stops black from castling queenside anytime soon. Knight c6. The queen is kicked. Queen c7 is played here. Okay. So now how does white get the pieces out in this position? Like this king side is locked in at the moment. This rook has potentially got the b file, but what about this rook? Well, we see in this position actually h4. This pawn is a potentially good asset in the long run if it gets that far, but it also makes way for the rook to come in like this. Very creative. e5 is played. And now just rook h3. With the black king stranded in the centre, this is more justified. The bishop's doing a wonderful job, it would seem, to stop queenside castling. Queen f7. Okay, and white really has got to get the rooks working here. Queenside casting is not possible for white either, of course. So these rooks, how to get them into the game? We see actually d takes e5, which means maybe a frontal attack later, or the use of the d4 square. We see knight c takes e5, rook e3, another pin. This is looking nice to pin and win pieces. The king now goes to d7. Okay, so we see rook b1. And now b6. And now we see the move knight f4. And there's a little bit of tactical play here already after knight f4. Okay, if, for example, knight takes f4, the queen is hanging. So I assume queen takes h7, and then rook e7 is one idea, which could be quite nasty for black. So, black plays rook a e8. And we see here now the other rook joining the party with the creative move rook b4. So both these rooks have been creatively put into the game. Look at this one now. It's very fun rook movements in this game so far. So we see bishop c6. And now the queen comes right back to put pressure on d5. Why not? It's as good a square as any to attack d5. Knight takes f4. Bishop takes f4 would seem tempting. But actually rook takes f4. Keeps black out of that g file. Bishop's cutting across there. Okay, still. Knight g6. Rook d4, not minding. It seems black's got a little bit of play in the centre. Does he mind the exchange? After rook takes e3, he actually plays f takes e3, which you look at that f4 square, it's secured by the pawn, the rook, the bishop. And white still has this pressure, you know, maybe c4 on the cards, or bishop c4, or even bishop b5 might be useful here for rook d5, potentially. So there's pressure. The king gets out of the way of things with king c7. But now we still see c4 with strong pressure on that d5 pawn. Black's a little bit passive here. So Mikhail Botvinnik's feeling the strain in this first game. He takes on c4, bishop takes c4, which loses an exchange. What else could he have done here? What could black have done in this position? Oops. Sorry. Sorry about that. So we see here d takes c4. Well, if I give you 20 seconds, what would be what do you think black can do here if you want to have 20 seconds to have a look at this position and come up with anything better? Because it seems in the game we're about to lose the exchange. Is there any improvement here for black? Rook d8 can't be played because we got the bishop on d8. That's one thing to rule out. Any ideas? No idea. Sorry, I just thought I'd give you some more time. Okay. So in the game we saw the loss of the exchange. So queen g7, bishop takes g8, and white just playing h5, and Mikhail he's had enough. He resigned. After this h5, the bishop's going to come to f4. It's pretty devastating stuff. So black resigned here. There was very, very inventive play here to get the rooks into the game. If we review this game again, so very inventive use of this variation, and you'd think, you know, it might not suit, you know, an attacking tactical player to have such a closed position, but and it was black which offered the seemingly ferocious gambit, putting Tal potentially on the defensive side of things with this queen g4 line. That black here initiates the sacrifice of 2 pawns for a seemingly quite scary gambit. I don't know how many of you would think twice about this, but if you don't take these pawns, black's just going to be better. So okay, so the pawns are taken. So 1 pawn and 1 pawn here. Black's already getting 1 pawn back anyway here, because c takes, there was queen c3 check. So getting 1 pawn back, and white playing this seemingly uncomfortable move, king d1. Okay, and then black trying to sort of exploit the new king position on this diagonal in particular with bishop d7. So we see check, knight e2. There's d3 move, which seems logical, but here, you know, black is not able to castle because of this bishop g5 coming up. Takes that centre pawn while he's got a chance. Knight c6, and we just see both of the rooks being very, very energetic from here. If we examine both these rooks coming into the game, it was very clever stuff. So okay, this rook comes into the game. And now this f4 square is good for the dark squared bishop as well. The white king was always safe here, it seemed, in this game. This retreat is very nice. That isolated pawn is a real target. So black really just crumbled here but the rook's doing a really good job, and c4 on the cards. The bishop had never moved, but still useful for supporting c4. So we see c4, and you know, what can black actually do in this position against this? It's very difficult to defend this now. White's bishop pair is very very good here. Everything's actually very well coordinated in the final position as a very good team. So game 1, Mikhail Tal beats Mikhail Botvinnik. Mikhail versus Mikhail encounters. So let's have a look now at the next decisive game of the match, which was to occur in round 6. And in round 6, Mikhail was playing black, and he was playing with the King's Indian defense. We saw c4, and we get a transposition from this English opening into a King's Indian defense, fianchetto variation, because knight f3 is played. As someone's mentioned to me just recently on YouTube, if white wants to keep it as an English opening, then white should avoid potentially knight f3 and play it like knight c3, and this is known as the Botvinnik system, which is quite topical, because then later we can put the knight on e2, so that might be a different thing. But here we're going into, the way this is played with knight f3, we're going into a King's Indian fianchetto variation now, transposition. White playing d4, which is probably a lot more aggressive than what I played recently in this similar sort of position. I played d3. But given that this knight's here, you might as well just, I think, just play it as a fianchetto King's Indian line. So d6, knight c3. We see knight bd7. White castles. And black's playing on a nice dark square strategy to try and invite white to sort of weaken these dark squares, or try and get counterplay on the dark squares in general. So we see e4. Okay, the first question, should black really release the tension immediately? Well, no, actually he doesn't. He plays c6, which means, you know, potentially annoying moves like queen b6 along the diagonals. It's a good pressure point on white. h3, and we see queen b6. So what does white really want to do in this position? It's actually it's potentially quite troublesome if white has to play d5. But if he doesn't play d5, there's potentially nasty tactics coming up. This kind of focal point on d4 here, you know, you can imagine the taking, and then even say knight e4 just to be on d4. So white plays d5. It concedes that there's some dark square weaknesses potentially, but there's another point here that black can actually potentially now play on this c file, believe it or not. So okay, so if I give you 20 seconds to have a look at this position, do you want to try and do an evaluation? I'll give you 20 seconds to have a check of this position. If I can get rid of this arrow, and you could, you know, just tell me, do you prefer white or black here? Anyone? A knight a4 is mentioned, even position. So, okay, this King's Indian fianchetto line is interesting, as I say, because black can try and get this C-file pressure going. So we see C takes D5, C takes D5, knight C5, putting pressure on E4 straight off the bat. How does white defend this? Because also Queen B4 could be annoying. Black's being very annoying here, because that could put pressure on E4. White plays knight E1, so the bishop comes to join protection of E4. Now we see bishop D7, which means C8 can be used quite quickly in this position. Whilst this bishop's tied down to B2 here, black can seemingly use operations on that C file quicker than white. Okay, so we see knight D3, and black takes, queen takes, and the C file operations start, and it looks to be a very comfortable position for black in some respects here, because black can double on this C file. This could be quite troublesome. Also, the queen is being a nuisance pinning this pawn, so tactically knight h5 would threaten knight takes g3 in this position. And actually after rook b1 we see this element exposed, knight h5, but the queen at the moment's guarding g3. It has to stay there. That's an optimal place for the queen in some respects. So bishop e3, kicking the black queen to b4. Now if a3, then just simply queen b3. So the queen is a nuisance on b4. Mind you, white's got pressure on a7. Black has to be careful about the queenside play here. Queen e2. And now we see an operation to double the rooks. We see rook c4. So black can potentially double the rooks. But with this bishop closed in, you might think, is this such a great idea, all of this? We see rook fc1, rook ac8, king h2. But more pressure is brought to bear on the e4 pawn now with f5. So black's playing, the pieces feel like a good team here for black. E takes f5 is played, which seems to want to exploit the loose knight. You know, if we take, then that drops. Black has bishop takes f5, hitting the rook. He's not worried about g4. The rook moves, but now g4 would seem to be on the cards. But here things get very, very interesting indeed, with the queen putting a lot of pressure on b2 in this position. This queen is protecting b2 at the moment, but black plays a move here which creates a huge amount of dynamic pressure. I wonder if you can spot it. If you're on play chess, please don't use the notation tab so we can play these guess the move quizzes. If I give you 20 seconds, what do you think black Mikhail Tal to move played in this position? Starting from now. Okay, any ideas? So black to move played this a very dynamic move now, which does quite a few things. He played knight f4, so offering the knight, and it would create a lot of dynamism. This bishop would be fantastic on the diagonal. b2 would be loose. If it's not taken, well, it's forking anyway. Queen and bishop here. So white takes it. His material up. but he's losing another pawn now. This interference with b2, so he's losing b2 as well. With b1 covered, it's not a problem to worry about the queen being trapped. c3 looks mightily under pressure. Okay, in fact, rook ab1 is played anyway, offering that exchange, because maybe, you know, things like queen e6 are going to be useful after taking. But Mikhail gets very clever tactically in this position. What he plays now guarantees this bishop even more dynamic play than maybe Mikhail had expected. So what move creates a little bit more dynamic play here? If I give you 20 seconds here. Okay. The move f3, as some of you guessed, well done, f3. Because that means this diagonal is also pretty dangerous for white. If this rook, you know, takes and we take here, we're left with an almighty pin on that poor c3 knight. We do see the almighty pin. This is the game continuation. Okay, rook b3. A lot of tactical pressure. There's a pin on this c file as well. We see rook d4. Mikhail Botvinnik's under great pressure. He plays bishop e1. Now there's this weakness of the last move. There's no f4 now possible to this check. So the king's driven back to the first rank. And even worse news, now bishop f4. So this c3 is looking a little bit fragile. Okay, but it's white to move. It comes up with knight takes e2. So we see rook takes c1, knight takes d4. Black is a piece down, yes, for seemingly, but he's playing rook takes e1 now. He was a piece down. So he's doing fine now. Okay, in fact, black is a pawn up now. So bishop e4, knight e2, attacking the bishop goes to e5. f4, bishop f6, as though the bishop might be interested in bishop h4 later. White gains his pawn back, so at the moment we're equal on pawns. Black goes a pawn up again. Rook c7 is played. Bishop takes a2, and black is now 2 pawns up. 1 pawn up. Check. Check. The king comes in. White's in a passive position here. It's been a bit of a disaster, all of the to get this ending, this miserable endgame. Black has the bishop here, past d pawn, active king, and this should be enough. So let's see some technique. So check, king comes in again. Now black gives up the bishop here. He just can win with this. He's confident he can win this with just that extra c pawn. And c pawn's pushed. Check. Actually, and with this move, white actually resigned. I think he's seen it's futile to resist, try and resist this position, to carry on. So that was game 6. So after this, Tal was 2 games up in the match. In round 6, in this Russia match, Moscow, 1960, 2 games up. So let's have a quick review of this game. For King's Indian fianchetto line players, if you're black playing the King's Indian against the fianchetto system, it's showed quite an easy game plan for black. So this c6 and queen b6 was intensely annoying, it seems. So I think Kasparov has also had games with this system of c6 and queen b6. So d5, we saw taking knight c5. There's no chance to pin the knight even here because that b2 is annoying. Probably queen takes b2 is on. So we see knight e1. Bishop d7. So black's just getting busy just on this c file. Knight d3. Exchange of knights. Rook fc8. So black's got nice play. The unexpected thing maybe about black's play in this game was this coming up with this knight f4 possibility coming up soon. So here, if black didn't play knight f4, well, white is threatening g4 in any case here to try and win material. Knight f4 is just a very, very interesting move. Is it technically sound? Probably not. If you run this game for an engine, it might not be at all liked by engines, but it creates a lot of practical pressure and chances. A lot of dynamism generated. So white took. So e takes. And wins another pawn. White offers the exchange back. But before taking that exchange back, we see f3, giving one of the pawns back. So very dynamic exchanges going on here, leaving black with all the pieces working very hard here, it seems. The black rook's nicely doubled, the black bishop's staring at complementary diagonals. The aesthetics of the game is impressive, really. The knight f4 sacrifice has been seen in other King's Engine classic games, exponents. It's a nice thematic idea. So here it's resulted in a lot of pressure, and this rook wants to come off this diagonal for knight e2 potentially to be played. But rook d4, the pressure continues. Check. Bishop f4. It's all really quite annoying. If the rook had moved here, then maybe bishop d2, for example, is strong. No, actually, I shouldn't. Actually, the rook hasn't got too many squares to move anyway, and it's a very complicated game. So we're just trying to get an impression of the game positionally, what happened. Really, here. So knight takes e2. We get this position where black's got his piece back with a better end game. After all that, got his piece back, better end game, and the rest is showing technique to some extent. It's just bringing the king up and not minding giving up the bishop pair, just going for that smaller advantage, but it's enough to win this pawn here. Okay, so that was game 6. Hope you got something from that game as well. Let's look at another interesting game for the match. So the next decisive game in the match was game 7. So in game 7, what happened? In game 7, again, Mikhail Botvinnik against Mikhail Tal played what you'd think is an ultra solid opening, and it kind of echoes like Karpov against Kasparov. You know, Karpov was trying to neutralize the dynamism of Kasparov and often played the Caro-Kann in later years against Kasparov with some success at fending off sometimes Kasparov's attacking pressure. So here, the Caro-Kann being used by Mikhail Botvinnik, another opening with a rock-solid reputation. And we see bishop f5, which is the main line. The knight goes back, bishop g6. Now, interestingly, I think the usual thing is knight f3 and h4. Here we see knight 1, e2. So Mikhail Tal gives the opportunity for things like knight f4 here. He's blocking in his own bishop for a moment. Okay, so we see knight d7, h4, h6, knight f4, the bishop gets tucked in, bishop c4. Okay, and it gives black the opportunity for a seemingly powerful and useful central break, because usually with the knight on f3, this e5 would be out of the question to play so quickly, the knight securing down e5. But here black is seemingly lured to play e5, but it's not without controversy to play e5 here. Okay, white pins that pawn, queen e7, d takes e5, we see queen takes e5 in this position, and Mikhail avoids the exchange of queens with bishop e3, bishop c5, but now only to accept the exchange of queens in this particular position with bishop takes c5. And so we've got a symmetrical pawn structure and the queen's coming off. Should this be okay for black, this position here? Rook he1, okay, knight f6, this knight is kicked to d7, check to the king, king f8. That c2 pawn now is really threatened, it's protected, finally it's protected. g5, aggressive outburst, g5, has taken knight h3. So this knight on the rim is at dim, rook g8. Make sure it can't get out for a moment. Black's pieces look seemingly okay, but now an interesting move, rook ed1. This d6 square might be a little bit sensitive in the black position here. If the rook comes to d6, it's putting pressure on f6 as well as d7. It's d6 square. a5, that's taken, and white's pawns are a little bit split up. Okay, but rook d6, it's annoying, this rook pressure. We see king e7. Now here, actually this rook on a5 is useful for rook e5. So if check here, maybe rook e5. So check wasn't used. Well, check actually, king takes d6. Pardon me. So this rook has to move anyway in this position. So actually it's supported, either move or supported, it's supported. But now look at this overloading. You see, it just takes a knight h5 to overload d7 to try and distract this away from defending. After rook e5, we do in fact see knight h5, and it starts to now look a little bit scary for black. All of a sudden, it seems like in the King's Indian game, how is it that Mikhail Tal has engineered the position he's able to double his rooks so quickly? Mysterious. In fact, all of the games we've seen so far, the rook movements have been very impressive, especially in that first game, the use of the rooks. Anyway, so they're optimal, it seems, on that d file. Bishop g6, and now it's a rook move which wins material here actually. If I give it 20 seconds, can respond. In fact, the very asset which is aesthetically is pleasing. So there's a bit of a clue there. Anyone? Okay. Rook takes d7 check is played. And this knight is actually quite useful, it turns out, to win material. Whoops. Knight f6 check. Winning material. Whoops. Is the knight stranded? Not particularly, it seems. The game continues though. Black piece down. Continues. Rook c5. Knight comes out. It's not that entirely straightforward. The rook can be quite a menace in the endgame. And actually now taking the second pawn is a little bit of a concern. Bishop takes b3. Now the rook versus the two knights, I know from some bitter recent experience, can be very tricky. It's good though in this position that white is immediately threatening some knight e4 check, and these pawns are ready to go. And we see after rook b5, knight takes g5, using that nice tactic that can't be taken. So this pawn is ready to go, this g pawn and the f pawn. Okay, check, check, check. Rook b2, g3, b5. So a little bit of a race of pawns on both sides. Check. And now f5. That knight on e4 supported by its partner stops f2 at the moment, and this pawn's ready to roll. It's this pawn which is really dangerous. f7. The rook comes to stop that. And now actually we see a very, very clever move. Knight h7, and it's not what you might think. It's not to do with it's not in the game. Black played b3 here. If king takes e4, what do you think white would play in this position if I gave you 20 seconds starting from now? Anyone? Okay, it would be knight f6 check for knight e8. So we queen like this. This pawn's queening. If you press play and you should get audio if anyone's stuck with audio. Oh, since 4 minutes. Okay, I think, okay, wrapping up anyway now. Whoops. Okay, we're wrapping up soon on this game. So, in the game we saw b3, knight d2, b2, king f3, king d4, king e2. So both knights are able to win this position. Check, check. Now knight b1, and black resigned here. I think if c3, maybe king c, it's probably king d1 which does it. Black actually resigned here. So okay, I think sound's still gone. I think we should finish now, yeah. So thanks for coming on Play Chess. And see you next week, next Tuesday. Okay. Hope you got something from that. Thanks very much.